we've got Louise here with Nordic Taxidermy. She is back in Durant, Wisconsin, my hometown. We actually connected last year and have been talking on and off ever since. She's been doing taxidermy for how many years?
I went to school in 2015 and I've been doing it full time since 2019.
Right on. So bringing you on because myself, I shot a bear in 2020 and my buddy and I had no idea what to do. We had no clue how to skin it out. We both looked at each other, wondering if each one of us had watched a YouTube video, and he watched about 10 minutes of one on the way into camp, and then he lost service. So we had zero idea of how to actually do it. I wanted to bring you on because you've been doing it for a while and walk us through the steps and what you look for, because you're on the receiving end of someone's butchering work, either good butchering or bad butchering out in the field.
I've seen
And
it all.
yeah, so how to appropriately get it to you as a taxidermist.
Well, me and my husband, we go out to North Dakota ourselves every year if possible. The most important thing, I think, if you got to pack out this deer and you have a little bit ways to travel, get him to the shade while you're working on him. It's important. Get him out of the heat, early season if it's really hot out. Get him in the shade. If you need to drag him, I would love it if you drag your deer as little as possible. I understand that's not quite, unless you have a sled, because it will affect the hair on the shoulders. I've had some terrible deer capes looking almost, you get a color difference where you rip, it's basically half of the hair that breaks off and you'll have a dark patch or a light patch on the shoulder, and there's nothing we can do to fix that. I have a taxidermy friend, she told me this morning she's lost 2 bears because of long drags or bad drags. You're pulling these animals over logs and rocks and all kinds of stuff, and you'll get naked spots. And again, there's nothing we can do to fix that. So
Right.
drag as little as possible, or at least be mindful of how you drag and what you drag them over. With that, I should say, if it's early season, if you're lucky enough to get a velvet deer, you need to handle the velvet as little as possible. For starters, all the oils and stuff you have in your hands, it will affect the integrity of the velvet, but also you don't know where the deer is at as far as, maybe losing that velvet. So you're running a risk of actually maybe twisting velvet off.
As far as dragging the deer and then the velvet goes, is there like if someone has to drag their deer or their bear, is it better to go with the hide?
Yeah, unfortunately, dragging it by the head is preferable, but so that can be tough if you're having a velvet deer and you want to drag it by the antlers. Maybe test it, see how strong that velvet is holding on. Don't tie a rope around that neck. That's another bad thing to do because that'll rip hair out if you're looking to mount it. Having that sled would be the absolute dream. And next on my list here, I have treat the hide the way you're treating your meat. You need to keep that dry, clean, and cold as soon as you can, basically. Best way to skin a deer, obviously, is you can hang it by its rear legs, hind legs, giving us enough cape to work with. When you hang the deer up by its legs, its front legs kind of come forward and you can misjudge a little bit. You'll be cutting right behind those shoulders and the shoulders are going to hang forward more, giving us less cape. So just try and stay in the middle of the belly, start there. Or if you're really not sure what you're doing, just cape the whole deer and give us the whole deer. That's absolutely fine. Western hunters, when it's warm out, you need to let that cape cool off before you fold it up and put it away in a bag because the hide is so warm. Typically you roll it up and then you put the head on top of the hide. Well, that heat will contain in there, get trapped in there, and that will create bacteria. And now a lot of times I've seen they start to slip on their neck.
What do you mean
So
slip?
the hair will slip because it's so warm and it just creates bacteria, and that will make the hair fall out, basically. I see a lot with bears also because they fold them up and, their skin is so thick, it takes forever for that hide to cool off once it's rolled up. So just leave it splayed out, lay it down. You can lay it overnight in a cool place, coolest place you can find, and let it cool off. And then you can roll it up. If you're not able to bring it in right away, you need to freeze that as soon as you can. With the velvet, there's a couple of different things. But if you can't freeze it right away, freezing them is the best thing. Keep them cold. and dry. You have to keep them dry. Water is your worst enemy with these things. That goes for the hide as well. Putting them in a cooler with ice is fine, but you need to make sure you have it in a good bag that's not going to let in any of that water. So that will also wreck your hide and the velvet.
Is the spray worth it? Does it actually work, or what is your experience with that?
It works. I'm looking at my husband's rack over here. He shot that back 4 or 5 years ago now, probably. And that was the first time I used that Velvalock, it's called. And it's still looking good. I'm curious myself, what's it going to look like 10 years from now?
Yeah.
Because it is a very cheap solution. A bottle, I looked it up this morning, a bottle you can get for $38. Whereas the most common thing is to freeze dry. And freeze drying is very expensive, but it is, I mean, bulletproof. I like that spray. If you're in the backcountry and there's no way you can freeze this thing in a couple of days, so I would definitely be packing that spray myself.
Okay.
It needs to be
And
warm out though. It's heat activated. So when Dan shot that deer, it was 90 degrees in Utah, so it was perfect. You let it sit out in the sun, takes 2-3 days, and it's good.
okay, I was just going to ask, is it better to let it sit in the sun then, since it is heat activated? With the hides, like with bear, I mean, with my bear, we draped it over a log, and we had the skin out and the hide down towards the ground. So we let the skin up towards, or like the inside skin up towards the sky. Is that the best way to let it air out? Is just keep the hide towards the ground and let it air out from the inside out, or is there a specific way that really matters, as long as both sides are kind of open to air?
You can leave it open to air a little bit, but for us to flesh it, it is very nice if the flesh side, I guess, is not dried out. So if you were to leave it overnight, I would definitely fold it in half, flesh to flesh, if that makes sense, and you don't let the air get to it. I've had some hides come and it's been exposed to the air, and there's no way we can flush that off once it's really dry. And since we can't flush it off, well, now the tan won't penetrate it as it should. So when you fold it up and put it in a bag, you need to make sure it's nothing is exposed to the air.
Say someone's packed in 5, 6 miles, 8 miles, they have a party with them, like there's 3 or 4 guys and they all have tags, and they get one on the second day of a 6-day trip. How long is it okay to let the hide stay out? If it's cool, like if the conditions are right, how long is it okay to let the hide stay out without getting it back to the truck and in a cooler?
I wish I had some experience with that so I could tell you. Yeah, it completely depends on the temperature. If it's a 90-degree day, opening week, you need to get that hide back to a cooler. I'm not sure how plausible it is to carry something with dry ice. Probably not much when you're backpacking it out like that. But yeah, you need to walk down the mountain and get it into a cooler as soon as possible.
Okay.
If it gets down to 30 degrees at night, and if it's a nice 40-degree during the day, then you'll be fine for a day or two.
But getting it back to the truck on ice is going to be the best bet.
Yes, unfortunately. People like to rinse stuff off with water. It's important to keep the cape clean. If you have excess blood around the mouth area, pretty important to kind of wipe that off, because that will create bacteria too. And I've seen a lot of times where the hair fall out. So a lot of people like to, I hosed my deer down before I brought it, and it's not great. Water is terrible. It's a direct path to bacteria. So I know it's tempting, but don't hose your animals down with water.
Okay.
Try and wipe them down as good as you can.
And you can wipe it down with water. That's fine to do. You're just talking about not dousing it in water.
Right. Yeah, you can spray a little bit of paper towel or whatever you have, and kind of rub it clean. But yeah, don't give it a bath.
Okay. I'm not trying to bathe it in water.
Another thing we appreciate is when you cape that deer off. I've gotten capes in, they cape it out in a barn or whatever, and they just throw it on the ground, and I get a meat side that's full of rocks or hay and gravel, and just try to be mindful of where you put it. It's really tough to get those rocks and that straw out of the cape, and it's very hard on our knives when we got to go fleshing it.
Are there specific cuts that we should be doing to make your life easier?
No, so the video I made, I'm talking about that Y cut that is up the neck and out towards the horns. A lot of times I have gotten capes where that straight part of the Y cut is going out to the side over a ear, and I I don't know what happens. I mean, you're probably excited out in the field. Maybe you don't have a sharp enough knife, or you got a too big of a knife, and sometimes I see it a lot with bears. It's a puzzle, and you don't understand what happened here. Were you guys drunk when you skinned this bear out? Yeah. Sometimes maybe they were. They're celebrating, they skin it out the next day. I don't know, but taking your time is crucial, and having your sharp knife. Other than what I talked about in that video, there's nothing else that you can do or that you should do to make it easier for us. If you want to do just the cut straight up the back, that's fine. You don't have to do that little Y cut that I did. But
Does a Y cut make it easier to get around the horn?
we have to do it. Otherwise, you can't mount it. I've seen people do just a cut from burr to burr, and somehow they get in there and they cut that plate off through that little hole just so they won't have anything to sew up. But I have yet to try it. I don't think I will. I don't know how that works.
For the folks that have to do it out in the field, is it easier to cape it out around the horn bases and all that? Is it easier to do right after the kill, or is it okay to let it cool overnight and then do it the next morning? What's going to be easiest for the hunter?
It completely depends how cold it is. If you're coming back to camp and it's 30 degrees out, leave that sucker hang. But if it's 40, 50 degrees out, it's going to take a long time for that deer to cool off. Unfortunately, you'd probably have to cape that deer out that same night. Go eat first, then you can cape your deer. For the easy factor, whether it's going to be easier not to skin it out, I couldn't tell you that there's a difference. Right away, obviously, maybe it'll come off easier when it's warm. I really couldn't tell you. I don't think it makes a difference for you.
If someone cuts at the last rib, is that going to be enough for you to?
You probably don't know that when you're out in the field, but it kind of depends if you just want a regular shoulder mount or if you want what we call a pedestal, because a pedestal mount is going to take a lot more cape. Then you're probably going to want to start at the last rib.
What's the difference between a pedestal and a normal shoulder mount?
So a pedestal, there's a wall pedestal, which shows more shoulder, and then there's a floor pedestal. The forms are just bigger. They just showing off more shoulder. But yeah, if you really want to make sure you have enough, I'd say go for that last rib and then just toughen up and carry it out.
Suck it up, buttercup. Once someone gets the mount back, how do they maintain a quality looking deer head, elk head, bear mount? How do they maintain the quality?
I thought about that today. I should start a side gig of going home to people and cleaning these animals off maybe once a year or something. People ask that a lot, and they get dusty. That's just a hard truth. And I use a couple of different things depending on what it is, but say your deer mount, I just use a dry dust rag and just wipe them down, with the hair. Go with the hair all the time. And it's most of the times it's glass eyes, a little Q-tip with Windex, wipe them down. You could use that on the nose too if you wanted, but don't get them wet. Don't be spraying cleaners and stuff on them. And with a bear, they get even dustier, right? So I like to use a big comb, a wide tooth comb, and I'll be brushing these guys. I'll brush them, so you brush them against the hairs, and that gets the dust flying, and you also fluff them up a little bit, make them look pretty again. With my little mammals, I back brush them all, but it's tough. You got to do it certain ways to make the hair lay certain ways and make it look good again, because sometimes you back brush these things and they look terrible. So yeah, I really need to. My husband thinks I should make a little brochure. This is how you should take care of your animal, and give that to every customer when they come through the door. I think that's the part of head of marketing / Dan's job to figure that out. Getting back to dusting that deer, you need to do that as often as you're dusting the rest of your stuff at home. Doing it once a year doesn't quite cut it.
Really? So what happens if Like, does the hair start to fall out? Like what?
No, they just start getting grubby looking. And depending on where you have them hanging in your house, I'm sure you've been at bars and you can see these big clumps of dust that are just kind of sticking to them.
Yeah.
They get greasy for whatever reason and it sticks to them. Don't keep your mounts out of the sun because the sun will most definitely burn the hairs and make them look pale and ugly. Keep them away from big fireplaces because that excessive heat will dry them out, and they need to be in climate control. So a lot of people hang mounts out in the garage, but the humidity in the summer and then the very dry winter, it can mess with them too. In the
Yeah.
summer, it can actually rehydrate, and then it dries in the winter, and that's when you get like cracks in the corners of the eyes and around the nose, and
Oh,
they can even start molding if it's excessively, if you get a lot of moisture in the summer.
really? What is the ideal temperature of the room? Is there a certain temperature range?
No, your room temperature,
Okay.
70 degrees. I haven't
Okay.
thought about that, but no, I just assume
Well,
that everybody keep their mounts out in their houses
right. Well,
where they should be, where they should be.
some, right. If you're going to spend that kind of money on a taxidermy, you got to put it in a temperature controlled room, in my opinion.
Yes, yes.
Well, so, the reason I ask about the temperature range is because I like the places that I stay a little bit cooler, like mid 60s, upper
Yeah,
60s, and then I know some people keep their house at like 78, 79.
yeah.
So
As
I
long as
wasn't
they
sure.
got the humidity under control, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. Um, Anything else with the maintenance?
No, if you ask me, there's not much to it. Just give them a good dusting once in a while. Habitats is tough. The more brush and stuff you have, moss, it just collects that dust, and it's really hard to get it off of there. Compressed air is really the only way to go to really get it out of there. You can try
Okay.
vacuuming it, but
Yeah, I was going to ask about a leaf blower.
yeah, you can try that.
Okay.
But
You know,
I've had people ask me about these little cans, of compressed air, and I'm sure that works just fine. I have my air compressor out here, so I just blow them off every once in a while, but
yeah, that seems
not
to do the
everybody's well.
trick.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so you haven't gotten like you do mountain lions, bobcats, I see like elk. You have
Mhm.
everybody's coming to you to drop this stuff off. You don't get these things in the mail.
I have the only thing I bought a bobcat once because it was really pretty from Ohio. That's the only thing I've ever had shipped to me. Yeah, I'm not that popular yet, Rob.
Well, because like I see all these animals that are not huntable in Wisconsin, like Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa. I'm like, I wasn't sure how these people were
Mm-hmm.
getting all this stuff to you, but they're probably
All,
residents.
all, yeah, all these mountain lions I've done are local guys or fairly local.
Okay.
It's interesting to see how people get around that are right around you. I've gotten mule deer from Alberta from a guy, one of my very first customers. She lives in Minnesota. I've gotten caribou and muskox, but these are all local guys, Wisconsin
Going
guys. It's the best part of the job, seeing all these cool critters for sure. The videos that I made, I put them on my YouTube page for anybody that hunts in the CWD zones. They have to cape them out. I did those videos, so they'll find that on Nordic Taxidermy, I believe, on YouTube.
and I'll link
You've
those in the show notes too.
Yeah, you've watched them. Was it? I mean, to me, it looks obvious, but does it look easy enough for you?
I mean, you make it look easy. It's kind of like me doing physical therapy and training and all. Like it's what I do
Sure.
for a living, so I take it for granted. But no, I learned. I didn't know about the wide cut. I had no idea about that. And
Mm,
cutting the face, I didn't know about that at all either. So um,
yeah.
yeah, I learned. I put them in. I think it was 1.75 speed, so you're flying right through
Oh,
it.
is there a way one can save that? So if you're in a area where you don't have any service, can you save that video and
I'm not sure if you
no?
have to have YouTube Premium in order to save it, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, phones now you can screen record on phones and you can do you can do video screen record, so someone can video screen record while they're watching your video, and then it would be on their
sure.
phone.
Yeah.
So they could do that, so that they have it in the back country with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
because most of the places, like if you're out west, you're not going to have service to look up the
Right.
YouTube videos. So packing it out, is it okay to put it in a trash bag, or is it best to put it in one of those cheesecloths that can stretch over the head, stretch over the hide, and all that stuff, and then stuff that in your backpack to let it breathe? Either way, it's not going to breathe well in your backpack. But is it okay to put it in a trash bag and not have and completely shut it off from air?
At that point, when you're packing it out, I would say that hide is still going to be really warm. So I would put it in one of those, what did you call it?
Cheesecloths or
Yes.
game bags. Yeah,
Yeah,
one of
I
the
would
game
put it in a
bags.
game bag too. It's not going to breathe a lot, but it's going to breathe a heck of a lot better than in a trash bag. The trash bag is just going to lock all that heat and moisture in there, and that thing is going to cook before you're however long you're going to be walking. If you have either, just roll that sucker up and put it under your cap on the backpack.
Now, with rolling it up too, I think you mentioned this earlier about like at night to fold flesh to flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how it should be forward? Like when you pack it up, roll it flesh to flesh, so that way the hide's not touching the fleshy side at all.
Yeah, I don't care if the hair side touches the meat side. I just don't want any of the meat exposed to the air so that it can dry out. But if the meat side is very bloody, then yeah, don't fold the hair side onto it. With antelope, I will say they have a very weird hair. It's hollow, and if you get a lot of blood on that hair, it will actually soak it up. And there's no good way for us to get rid of that. I'd say there's hardly any way for us to get rid of that. So if it gets really bloody, you're going to have this rusty brown stain on the beautiful cape. And so that's the thing to think about with antelope. A lot of people, they just put that thing in a bag, and the blood that comes off of the flesh side, it's just going to lay in there and stew with the hair.
What are your top three pet peeves from getting hides, heads, all that stuff from people?
Anytime somebody says, "Oh yeah, I caped it off the head myself," my inner voice is like screaming. I talked about that in the video, but the back corners of the eyes are always cut, and it's always really hard to fix it to make it look good. With bears, I know I'm in for a treat trying to puzzle them back together the way people have been cutting them. And sometimes it's not even, you go to an outfitter and you'd think the outfitters would know how to do it, but 8 times out of 10, it looks like their kid was doing it, because it's going here and there and it just doesn't make sense. And the way people skin their animals, the way they cut them, that's my biggest pet peeve. I really like I call it a swing blade knife. I guess you turn it around and then there's your gut hook.
Yep.
I really like that for making my cuts.
Is there a specific brand that you like?
The one I have is an Outdoor Edge. I even think that Havilland makes those knives too for replaceable blades. Yeah, that's my biggest. I'm trying to think what the other two would be. I have been pretty lucky. I haven't lost too many hides because of one bear I got in once, and this kid shot it, and then they put it in the garage for a few days while they were thinking about what they were going to do with it. And by the time they brought it in, it was halfway rotten. I was kind of handling it a little bit, and the hair was already coming out, so I had to say sorry, but you should have brought this in a little sooner. Or when guys in the Midwest, they shoot a nice big deer, and now they're going to drive around the county and show all their buddies this deer. And that's a good way to lose the hair also. If you're going to drive around with this deer all day, and let's say it's a warmish day, it just comes back to you need to cool that deer down as soon as you can, and to keep the quality of the cape. So if you want to show it to buddies, bring it in, I'll skin it out, and you can take the rack home with you, and then you can show it off. I do that all the time.
If people want to get a hold of you, if they have other questions, you have your YouTube channel, Nordic Taxidermy, on YouTube, right?
Easiest way to get a hold of me is probably Facebook.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram a little bit too. I will answer messages if I get that there, but give me a call, text me, email me, find me on Facebook. Absolutely.
Okay.
Anytime.
And do you have a website?
I don't have a website because Facebook has been so good to me. I'm overthrown with work right now, so I don't feel like I need it.
Yeah. No, there's no point. reach out on Facebook if you guys have any questions or any other things that you want to run over. Louise, I appreciate you hopping on, and
Absolutely.
we might have to do this again if I get one down and totally
Yeah.
butcher the Cape job, so that way you can talk about how stupid job I did after doing this podcast.
Yeah, anytime I can educate people on how they should take care of them out in the field, that's good. 'Cause I've seen a lot of bad stuff.
You're on the receiving end of all the bad Cape jobs, so it
Yeah.
always helps to get some feedback from you guys. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to your podcast app and consider leaving a review. If you think a friend or a family member may benefit from listening to this podcast, please consider sharing this episode with them. We appreciate your help in the growth of this podcast. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for even more content and the weekly Hump Day Q&A, where you can get all of your human performance, rehab, women's health, and injury prevention questions answered. If you're interested in getting hooked up with even more content from Wilderness PT from the comfort of your own home, head over to wildernessphysicaltherapy.com and get signed up for the Spike Camp membership. This is where you'll have access to prior seminars and a workout that'll have you in shape each fall, designed by yours truly. Since you're there, check out the mid-month media newsletter that goes out 1 to 2 times a month, which includes a variety of topics with the most recent research on health and human performance. You can sign up by hovering over the free resources section and subscribe to any of the free guides, or simply sign up under the mid-month media newsletter tab.